Black Nouveau. This is our edition for April 16th, 2014. I'm Joanne Williams. April is National Minority Health Awareness Month. We'll look at the problem of depression and discuss ways to enjoy better mental health. We have an update on Tommy Walls, the 2010 Milwaukee Boys and Girls Club Youth of the Year. We begin with A. Phillip Randolph and the Pullman Porters. That important history is available at 2 nearby museums.
All aboard! All aboard!
The story of the Pullman Porters is truly an all-American example of pride and prejudice.
Service over servitude is the goal. It's okay to be a regular working person. You can still be a superhero. You can still be a superstar by doing regular things. We want regular people to do extraordinary things.
The men who cooked and served on the trains, shined the shoes of the rich and famous who rode the trains, made the beds and cleaned the compartments for $68 a month, were proud of the quality of service they provided on the Pullman cars. But they were also extremely underpaid, disrespected by the management of the company, and often rudely treated by the passengers who called them all George. If you had a relative who worked on the railroads, like I do, you may know a little about the Union of the Porters, but most people don't know this chapter in American history. Lynn Hughes was one of them, until she bought 3 houses in the Pullman district of Chicago in 1994, strictly as a business investment. She took a guided tour of the neighborhood and learned about the buildings, about founder George Pullman, about the architecture, but nothing about the families who lived there while working for the Pullman Company.
Where I raised my hand and I asked the question, "Excuse me, can you tell me what role African Americans played in the Pullman story?" And there was a hush that went over the room that was deafening, and I thought, oh my goodness, what did I do? What did I say? But because I didn't know, I didn't know. And so when he paused for a very long time, he came back, which to me seemed like an eternity. He responded by saying, "Well, I believe they worked on the trains." And so I thought he was going to say something else and go further, but he didn't, and
So, to educate herself, she got library books on the Pullman Porters, and when she read this one, her life changed.
And it was called A Long, Hard Journey. I took the book and went home, sat down and read the book, and I found myself weeping out loud. The story was so well written. It was if the content of the story leapt from the pages and just pierced my heart. It occurred to me that none of that information that spoke about the struggle that they had trying to break into organized labor and being recognized into organized labor was given on the tour. And I heard myself saying, well, that's a shame.
Hughes decided that the story of A. Phillip Randolph and the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters needed to be told and needed to be on display right here where it all started. So she turned this building, one of the row houses built by Pullman, into a museum.
I did not have the money. I did not have the technical expertise. I did not have the education in terms of museumology. But it was on my heart to do because in my opinion, they deserve the recognition. All of the African Americans who worked on the railroad, who created the foundation for the black middle class, that their story should be told and incorporated into the information that is given to people about Pullman.
She called around the country for advice from other museums on what to do and remodeled the building into a 2-story display of the history of the Brotherhood.
What drove you? Anger. Somebody saying to me that I didn't have credentials to do a museum. And what it said to me is that I did not have the right to honor the history and the legacy of these men.
A. Phillip Randolph fought the Pullman Company for 12 years for the right to organize the Porters into a union. Along the way, he negotiated with the American Federation of Labor, the AFL, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and George Pullman. Many of the Porters lost their jobs because they wanted to organize. They were beaten, they were bribed, but in the end, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters was recognized, becoming the first black labor union in America. Lynn Hughes has put her heart and soul into the museum for almost 20 years, but it's time to look to the future, and she's passing the torch of leadership on to David Peterson, Jr.
It's a blessing and an honor.
Why is it an honor?
It's an honor because I feel that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, and I have the opportunity to take forward a story that has not been told to the next generation.
Peterson grew up around the corner from the museum, but learned nothing about A. Phillip Randolph or the Pullman Porters in his school.
No, I hadn't studied about it at all. It just came about because, being a neighborhood kid, Dr. Hughes, we were all just interested in what it was she was doing over here, so she kind of just mothered the entire neighborhood.
On display is equipment used by the Porters: keys to the overhead beds and compartments, lamps to see in the darkened cars, a uniform worn by a porter. There's also ample information about Randolph's leadership in organized labor and his critical role in the 1963 March on Washington, which was aimed at securing jobs and freedom for all Americans.
Is our fervent plea for strong voices to be raised from all areas of our society, out of varying traditions and interests, to arouse the conscience of our land in order to achieve, in fact, that which has already been won in law, and what always has been in the hearts of good men: equality, justice, freedom, and human dignity for all men, regardless of color or country.
But they were men of respect, honor, and dignity, and they maintained their integrity while doing so, even while being disrespected.
For more information about the A. Phillip Randolph Museum, go to www.aphiiliprandolphmuseum.com. The National Railroad Museum in Green Bay also has an exhibit on the Pullman Porters. It includes a restored Pullman car from the 1920s, the Lake Mitchell.
I got the choo-choo blues, a hell of all night and day. I got those choo-choo blues, I said a hell of all night and day. Well, because the Panama Liberty took my sweet man away. Come on, play it, play it.
Occasional depression is a natural part of living, but being depressed all of the time is not natural and it's not healthy. Over 20 million Americans suffer from depressive illnesses, and African Americans are overrepresented in that number. In a few minutes, I'll talk with Dr. Ramel Smith about ways families can cope with the disorder. But first, Everett Marshburn has this report.
Backlight, key light, and the field light.
Those have basically key, then the backlight.
Alan Newson enjoys working with students at the MATC telecasting program. He spends hours daily volunteering his time. He's been doing that for a number of years since his broadcasting career was cut short by illness, and that was but one in a series of challenging events for Alan. The oldest of 4 boys, he became the male head of the household at a young age, when his mother's drug addiction split the family.
I started taking care of my brothers when I was about right before high school, so 13. So I started taking over raising for them for 13 from high school through college.
Not long after college, he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and shortly thereafter, diagnosed as being clinically depressed.
Depression, to me, from my experiences, it gets me really, really low. I mean, sometimes I do have suicidal thoughts. Sometimes I look over to the numerous bottles of pills over there and think, maybe I should just take them all and just end it all. But then my religion and my upbringing tells me that I shouldn't do that.
Depression can be caused by imbalances in brain chemistry. It can also be triggered by stress, poor nutrition, personal loss, financial challenges, and relationship difficulties. Clinical depression is a mood disorder where feelings of sadness, loss, anger, or frustration can interfere with everyday life for weeks.
I really don't want people to know how I feel, because to me it's a responsibility for me to always pretend that everything's all right.
Al and his brother Jarrell share a small apartment.
He has his moments. His moments range from one extreme to being happy, and the next being, really sad. But I try to work with that as best as I can, seeing what he's going through. It has taken its toll on me personally, and I guess mentally as well, since I also have depression as well.
I hate the fact that he is clinically depressed. I think his depression affects me just about as bad as it affects him.
Hand me a fork, please.
We do help each other, because there's all the time we can't go to a therapist and say what's wrong with us. So for me, having gone through therapy more than he has, I know how therapists talk to bring people off that ledge, so I talk to him like that, and sometimes it works, and sometimes he looks at me and says, "Will you please talk to me normally, like a brother instead of like a therapist?" And that's when we really have a real talk.
So you probably feel pretty squeezed.
I feel squeezed pretty much 97% of the time, yeah. Yeah. I don't feel squeezed when I get my disability check, and then that lasts for about 3 days after I pay all the bills and get food. It starts all over again, yeah.
Alan has been in therapy for about 7 years. He started seeing Jeff Luzon in the fall of 2010.
It's important to understand that depression is common among everybody. And there are always varying features of depression. Maybe we call it clinical depression if the symptoms are of a severity, frequency, and duration significant enough to meet a diagnosis. But most all of us are depressed, maybe even at some point during every day, or at some point every week or every month. It's just not more often than not. I think it's treatable. We certainly can lessen it. I think when someone has something like MS, you might not be talking about complete remission of this mood state. But if someone has misery, and they're experiencing discomfort on a 0 to 10 scale, and they say, "Oh, this is a 9, I cannot imagine it getting much worse." Maybe we can't bring it down to a 0, but what if we can bring it down to a 6 or a 4? So we can do that.
And Alan believes that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Sometimes I do, like today, and sometimes I don't when I'm in that real low place, but there is always the light that's at the end of the tunnel for me. Sometimes I don't see it, but I do see it.
Dr. Ramel Smith is with us now. We just heard about depression. First of all, how common is a serious depression like that?
Well, depression is very common, but when you start talking about a chronic depression, that doesn't hit the whole population as much as we would think. But when it does get to that select population, I don't even want to go into percentages because I think it's very underdiagnosed, but overdiagnosed from a clinical standpoint. But it's probably about 10% of the population that really hits it at a hard point where you need extra treatment to go through with it.
How often does it run in families?
Well, that's one of the things. Sometimes we talk about genetic predisposition. So if your mom has it, it's a likelihood that you have it. But it's not just from a genetic standpoint, but it's also the stress that we inherit. How do we handle situations? So it's not just a pure genetic, but it's that nature and nurture side of it.
When you get to the point of knowing that you have depression or any other mental challenge, what should you do? Go to your family?
Yeah, well, you know what, that's the hardest thing. It's the denial aspect. So the first thing, if you can get somebody to admit it, that's the best thing. And the thing is, we all go through some side of some type of depression, but it becomes chronic when it becomes something that it stops you from doing the things that you normally do. And at that time, you normally need a family member to help you to say, hey, because sometimes you can't even see it yourself, and you need someone to say, hey, listen, you're not yourself right now. And that's where the family has to have enough love and enough strength to tell somebody something they might not want to hear. And even when they hear it, they may want to reject it. So when we start talking about the importance of family, it's important for families to help to identify, but then also to help not to, sometimes you get those families who say, well, you know, they have it and they want to move away. So you need families not only to be strong enough to help identify it, but you need families to be strong enough to help them to deal with it at each phase of the depression.
Depression isn't the only mental challenge that people can have, but how can we, with all the myriad of things that can happen in our lives, how can we maintain good mental health? What can we do?
Well, see, and that's the biggest thing. And this is one thing why I love the Affordable Health Care Act, because what it's talking about is a preventative maintenance program. Whenever we talk about mental health, we always talk about it from a disease care. What's wrong with somebody getting a pill to solve the ill, things of that nature. What we want to do is to be very proactive. So we're working with kids all the way from the beginning so we can prevent these things from happening. When we talk about good mental wellness, it's those simple things that we already know about eating well, about sleeping right, about good exercise, having love around us, those things that inspires us, that encourages us. And sometimes it seems like a simple answer and almost too good to be true, but if we can go back to those things, that's exactly it.
What about exercise? I remember there was a coach for the Milwaukee Bucks who was here several years ago who created an exercise program for people who were facing mental challenges, and it seemed to work for them. Is exercise a real important key?
It is one of the best things when we talk about one of those simple things we can do. That's it, because it raises the adrenaline and increases the endorphins. And whenever you talk to anybody who's depressed, when we think of exercise, you think somebody lifting weights hard, but it doesn't have to be that. It's those fun things. Something that's going on now is this Zumba craze, and you see people who get into the Zumba, and it's like a dance craze, but it's an exercise. But what it is, it makes you feel good. But not only does it make you feel good, it has health benefits from a physical standpoint where people see themselves start to look better, but also that internal things that we can't really see and can't describe. We just can feel and say, wow, there is a difference. So exercise is excellent.
Is the opposite of a mental problem being happy?
Yeah, you know what, the craze with this Pharrell song, Happy, just in that sense, when you hear something that's happy, it automatically takes you to a different level. There's I don't want to get too technical, but there's a chemical neurotransmitter in our brain called serotonin. When a person is sad, that serotonin goes down. In order to get it back up, they sometimes turn to medicine, what they call a SSRI, selective serotonin re-up intake inhibitor, and that serotonin is raised. But the thing about it is our body creates serotonin naturally. So every time you smile, every time you do a good deed, every time you do something that makes you feel good, and it's not only just you, but even if you see somebody do something good, that naturally raises your serotonin. So when we talk about what family can do, that's why when you see somebody sad, we have this natural reflex of want to make them smile, because that makes you feel better.
Does laughter make a difference?
Oh, laughter is a cure. It is one of the most natural medicines that we can have. That doesn't solve all of the ills, but it helps get us through that first point. Just like if you have a headache and you take an aspirin and say, I just need to get over this initial pain, sometimes that medicine of laughter is one of the best and cheapest things that we can get.
And it's easy to share.
And it has no counter effects, no after effects, no ill effects.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Dr. Ramel Smith. See? Your smile makes all of us feel better. Thank you very much for talking with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now here's that update on Tommy Walls and the Milwaukee Boys and Girls Club 2010 Student of the Year. You may remember him from this profile.
Okay, so then
I got the 7. I thought every child had drugs in their house. I thought every child had what I had. You know, I thought I was an ordinary child. But when I got here, you know, it felt like people are saying please, people are saying thank you, people are telling me that, hey, you dropped some money. People are just manners, you know, you see it on TV, but for me, I thought, oh, that's fake, I don't really.
This is Tommy Walls, this year's Northwestern Foundation Youth of the Year for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Milwaukee. This is the highest honor a Boys and Girls Club member can receive. The challenges Walls has had to overcome, hard work, and his positive outlook on life garnered him this award. One challenge coming from a different type of background.
The schools Well, from the middle school experience, the schools in Detroit are basically a get in, get out. Get in, get out. Here is get in, know what you want to do, have a relationship with the teachers if you need something to fall back on when you get to college, and then you get out. So it's the in-between pieces that really matters. What's going on when you're actually in the school, not just come to my class, get the work done, and graduate. You know, it was more of a come to my class, know the students, know me, know why I want you to succeed and graduate.
Tommy said coming to Milwaukee was a new beginning. His stay in Milwaukee started off as a short visit with newfound relatives. A call from his mother, who is sick with the HIV virus, told him to stay, and as families do, they put their arms and support around him.
We had gone to a family reunion in Detroit and returned, and my brother, in his kind of impulsive way that he is, brought Tommy back with him. Apparently they exchanged some words about his circumstances, his living situation. My brother was not in any position to bring a child into his home, and so called me and said, "Hey Tiff, Tommy can't go home. Can he stay with you?" And as simple as that sounds, it really was about like that. But I kind of knew it was going to happen. I mean, this was a pattern that my family had engaged in since I was a little girl.
Oh, can I freestyle? Let me freestyle.
Tommy overcame his home life challenges, his mother in Detroit who he misses, and his father who motivates him from prison.
We write back and forth, and even though, you know, throughout my high schooling, he left when I was about 8. And so ever since then, he explained to me, I know I can't be there, but I'm going to help you regardless, you know. I'm going to write you back and forth, give you keynotes. Every time you become a man or you become successful, I'm going to tell you what to do. So he actually raised me in prison. So for those who think that, you know, the men that are in jail aren't really thinking about things that are on the outside that they really care about, it's not true. They care about everything. And the letter to him is treasure. And so if I can give him that treasure and he can give me the little piece of advice to make me a better man, then I'm all right with that.
Do you still communicate with him?
I do communicate with him. We had a time where we didn't talk because he was going through his transition and he just got moved. But I talked to him a couple of days ago and I told him about this interview. And he told me to, you know, stay strong, you know, and keep him in mind.
To be successful, you need people in your corner, and Tommy has a few. One is the lead teacher, the first teacher he met at the Montessori and AP World School.
I remember the first conversation we had. I came in and I said, I'm coming straight out of middle school and I'm a 3.6 student, you know. And I thought it was big and bad. And she came to me and said, oh, you're going to do excellent here.
He has grown amazingly, not only in his ability to think academically and his ability to write and draw and all things that he thought he couldn't do well, that he's really progressed and grown in. But he's also grown in his ability to come into himself as a man, to stand up for the ideals he believes in.
To help submit his ideas and values, along with empowering him, was the Boys and Girls Clubs of Milwaukee.
The club has really made a major impact on my life because they have really challenged me to be the best. And the club manager, Michael Waite, at the Marshall Club, when we were in the Marshall building, forced me into the club, actually put the application in my face and said, you are going to be here. And I'm like, who are you to tell me where I'm going to be? You know, I'm already stressed out. I want to go back to my house in Detroit. And he said, no, you are going to be here. And so I saw the fierce look in his eyes and I said, maybe he actually believes in me. But this was abnormal because no one has ever told me this.
It's unusual to find a young man who is more or less happy-go-lucky all the time and really seeks to find the next opportunity and step up to a plate as a young leader. And I saw that immediately in Tommy the first couple of weeks.
He said he believes you have contributed to making him the best man he can be. What do you say to that?
Well, you know, I don't think it's any secret that young African American men, older African American men, have some challenges. And, you know, I know that from my work that I do, I know that from my personal experience, and my goal was to not have him be that type of individual. So I kind of tried to do the opposite of what I had seen others do in terms of, you know, letting boys be boys and tolerating disrespect and laziness and that kind of stuff.
And I'll welcome her into the store, and I hold the door for dudes and hold the door for and it really
It's important to Tommy that he succeeds and stays motivated to avoid the prison bars.
It's something
My dad, you know, he tells me about the experiences that happen in there. They have no respect for you. You lose all your respect points once you're behind those bars. And I said, Dad, I'm never going to jail. I'm never going to jail since I was little. I'm never going to jail. And so if I just keep thinking that, and keep following through, then it's going to happen. But life is what you make it. I mean, if you're going to cause trouble, then you're going to get trouble. You know, but if you call peace, you know, sometimes you'll get trouble, but more than not, you will have some peace.
Tommy won an urban scholarship to Marquette University. He'll graduate in May. He's going to continue his education at the University of Illinois to get a master's degree in social work. We wish him all the best. Finally, we note the passing of Charles Chuck Stone, a Tuskegee Airman and one of the founding members of the National Association of Black Journalists. He served as editor-in-chief of the Chicago Daily Defender, worked for a number of mainstream newspapers across the nation, and he also taught journalism at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And that's our program for this week. For Black Nouveau, I'm Joanne Williams. Thanks for watching. Good night.